Transformers 1 is now playing in theaters, giving us a total of 9 Transformers movies, and I finally found the time to rewatch the other 8 Transformers movies, which means it's now time to rank them. So I don't have much else to say other than subscribe, and let's get into this thing. Coming in at number 9 is The Last Knight, and long story short, this movie sucks. And my least favorite part about this thing is that it undoes and goes against a lot of the things that the first movie set in place. Especially that whole thing with Bumblebee fighting in World War II, and then there was just a lot of other things going on in terms of just explaining the plot of this movie, and it all just didn't really work out well at all in the end. I thought Quintessa was a really weak villain. She's barely in the movie at all, and then they made it seem like Nemesis Prime was going to play this huge role in the movie. He was only in it for like 5 minutes, and then he fought Bumblebee and then was just miraculously okay, I guess, because Bumblebee spoke to him. The action was fun, I guess, but everything else was kind of just the worst, and you kind of leave this movie thinking, what the heck did I just watch? At number 8 is Age of Extinction. Now, this is the only other Transformers movie outside of The Last Knight that I genuinely dislike, but I will say that this movie's saving grace is its action and, of course, the Dinobots. Hands down, the coolest scene in this movie, though, was when Optimus took on Grimlock in order to get the Dinobots to work with the Autobots. But on the other hand, this movie's weakest part, I would say, outside of it just being way too long, is definitely the human characters. They tried to give us this father-daughter story with Mark Wahlberg's character and his daughter, and you could really just care less about it. I really feel like you could have removed their characters completely from this thing, and it wouldn't have affected the Autobots story at all. And I'm not saying that you have to have amazing characters in this movie. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a Transformers movie. They are not known for having deep human characters, but at least in those first 3 movies, the human characters were at least entertaining. This movie also fell victim to just having a lot going on. I mean, we had the humans working with Lockdown in order to hunt down the Autobots, while they were also creating their own form of Transformers and essentially made Megatron into Galvatron. And there was just a lot of elements in this thing that really just, again, didn't come together all that well in the end. At number 7, I have Rise of the Beast. Now, this movie is the definition of just fine for me. I mean, I don't think it's a great movie, but I also don't think it's a bad movie by any means either. It was cool to finally see the Maximals, and I will say this is some of the best Transformers action that we have gotten, especially that final battle where we had that one shot of the Autobots and Maximals teaming up to pretty much just take everyone out, and then you have Bumblebee's entrance on top of that, which is a top 10 Transformers moment for me. And also, I thought Scourge was a solid villain. We've never really seen a villain dominate the Autobots, and especially Optimus Prime when he first fought them. So I thought that was cool to kind of have a menacing villain that you were like, I don't know if the Autobots can beat this guy without help. We also had a couple of new human characters who I thought were just fine. I mean, they were definitely better than the human characters we got in the 4th and 5th movies, because at least in this movie they had something to do and contribute. I was a little mixed on Pete Davidson playing Mirage in this thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, he definitely had his moments, but throughout this entire movie I kind of just heard his voice the entire time, so it kind of pulled me out of it a little bit. And also the whole thing with Optimus hating humans in this movie just felt weird to me because that's kind of out of character for him. But yeah, this movie wasn't the best, but it does have enough good in there to keep you entertained. At number 6 is Revenge of the Fallen. Now, I definitely think this is the funniest Transformers movie. I mean, everything from the twin Transformers to just about everything that came out of Shia LaBeouf's mouth in this thing I thought was hilarious. Then you have John Turturro's character, Simmons, who I think is one of the funniest, goofiest, most unserious characters in this franchise. Now, yes, the story was a little bit thin, and the Fallen was a cool villain, but in my opinion, he really only showed up at the end of this movie. And I also thought it was a little bit predictable as well, especially having Optimus die. You're obviously like, oh, well, they're gonna have to bring him back to life at some point. So that aspect of the movie was a little bit predictable, but I still found myself being entertained by this movie. I think the action was one of the highlights. There were a lot more Transformers, and these fights just took place on a bigger scale. And don't even get me started on Optimus going 3v1 versus a bunch of Decepticons, because that is one of my favorite moments in this franchise, because even though he died after that fight, he low-key won that fight. Anyways, even though this wasn't the most amazing Transformers movie, I still got a lot of enjoyment out of it. At number 5 is the animated Transformers the movie. Now, unlike the other films that I had to rewatch, I actually watched this movie for the first time in order to make this video, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this thing. This was literally action-packed all the way through. I mean, it was action scene after action scene after action scene, and the fight between Megatron and Optimus at the beginning of this movie was just freaking awesome. And then they went and killed off Optimus, which really surprised me, but it worked for this movie. Unicron was the main villain in this thing, and I hope we get to see him depicted in later Transformers movies as he was in this one, because I thought he was awesome in this movie. I also loved how 80s coded this movie was. I mean, everything from the animation to the music. If I knew nothing about Transformers and when this movie was made, I would still be able to guess that it was made in the 80s, because it just gave off that vibe. It felt like a classic 80s cartoon, which is ironic because, I mean, it was a classic 80s cartoon. Now, I haven't seen much of the 80s Transformers cartoon series, but if it has the same vibe as this movie, then I can see why the Transformers were so popular in the 80s. At number 4 is Dark of the Moon, and out of all of the live action movies, this hands down has the best action. I mean, the third act alone in this thing is a big reason on why I like it so much. Now, I'll be honest, it did take a while for this thing to get going, but from the moment that Sentinel turned on the Autobots, this movie was all gas and no brakes. I remember when I saw this movie for the first time, I think I was like 14 years old, and I honestly thought that they were about to kill Bumblebee there for a second at the end of this movie. Then you also have the final fight between Optimus Prime and Sentinel, and then later Megatron, and Optimus proceeds to kill Megatron with one arm and then take out Sentinel in the coolest way possible. Now, just like the other live action Transformers movies, the story was just kind of average overall, but the action absolutely carries this thing, and I loved it, except when they killed Ironhide, because that was a heartbreaker, and honestly, it was really unexpected in this thing. Moving into the top 3, and at number 3 is Bumblebee. Now, by far out of all of the Transformers movies, this one has the most heart. At its core, the story is about two characters in Charlie and Bumblebee who need each other to help themselves grow. We are used to seeing Bumblebee be this super cool warrior robot, and in this movie he is stripped of that through his memory and must work to get that back. And then we have Haley Steinfeld, who of course plays Charlie in this, and she is a bit of a loner, but she works through the loss of her dad to slowly become her old self again. It's got a lot of really fun, wholesome moments, and it's really a human story that's wrapped up in a Transformers movie. And I think that's what sets this one apart from the others, because the other ones are very much known for their action and not so much the story, but the story in this one gives this movie substance, and I think that's why it shines. And even though we didn't get as much action as we usually do in this one, I still really like the action that we got. I mean, I think we can all agree that the opening scene of this movie is one of the best action sequences ever in a Transformers movie, and I wish we could just get a whole live action movie just like that set on Cybertron. I also really like the G1 designs of the Transformers, and out of all of the live action movies, these are my favorite designs. But yeah, this is a wholesome movie with tons of charm, and it has a different feel from the other Transformers movies, and that's why I like it so much. At number 2 is Transformers, and you really can't go wrong with the original live action Michael Bay film. This was the first Transformers movie that I had ever watched, and I still like it just as much now as I did as a kid. I liked how they kept the story pretty simple. I mean, essentially this movie is about a kid who buys a car who happens to be a robot killing machine, and then he must help them find the Allspark and take on the Decepticons. This was really funny, and again, the action was awesome. Now, this movie came out in 2007, and the fact that it's closing in on 20 years here pretty soon is just crazy, but it still holds up today. And in a world where we've gotten very iffy CGI lately, the CGI in this movie somehow outshines a lot of the CGI that we are getting today. And after rewatching this movie, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that I noticed the CGI, or that the CGI kind of took me out of the movie. So that is a huge credit to this film. And for me, I think no matter how many Transformers movies come out in the future, sure this one will always be one of my favorites. At number 1 is of course Transformers 1, and the more I think about this movie, the more I love it. I mean, this thing, in my opinion, is dang near perfect. It's a great origin story for Optimus and Megatron, and even though this is an animated movie, as this movie goes on, it takes on a pretty serious tone. Now, I will be honest, I was a little skeptical of the voice casting going into this movie. I think a lot of people can relate to that statement, but I have to say, everyone did a pretty good job. Keegan-Michael Key was hilarious as Bumblebee. Chris Hemsworth did a solid job as Optimus Prime and having to follow up Peter Cullen, because let's be honest, no one will ever be as good as Peter Cullen is for Optimus Prime. But then you have David Tyree Henry as D16/Megatron, and in my opinion, he is the star of the show. He was amazing throughout this entire movie, and in my opinion, it kind of sounded like he changed his voice to be more evil as this movie went on, and as D16 changed into Megatron, so he could kind of match more what Megatron sounded like, and I thought that was pretty cool. Then we get to the action, and man, this is hands down the best Transformers action I have ever seen, and I just think they were able to do more with the action because they went the animated route. And the animation is another good thing about this film, because this was also a stunning film, and you really saw that animation shine during those action scenes. Now, if you want to see me go on and on about how great this film is, then you can go check out my review on this movie. But yeah, this is easily, in my opinion, the best Transformers movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, please go watch it. That was my ranking on all of the Transformers movies. Be sure to let me know in the comments your rankings on all of these movies, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.